Hi, I'm Tim Stein and welcome to this video in which I talk about balance of notes in a chord, what musicians often refer to as voicing. And what I mean by that is you play a chord. Let's take a few bars from this piece by Tchaikovsky from his children's album Opus 39 called In the Church. Okay, well, there are 4 notes. Most of those chords have 4 notes. What's the important note? What note do you want to hear? Do you want to hear the top note? Do you want to hear the bottom note? Do you want to hear the middle note? Well, there is a very clear melody there. And the question is, how do you make that melody note stand out if you've got 3 other notes? Well, a useful tip is to practice what I call ghost playing. So you play the top note. If we just take the right hand from the first bar, and we just take the first 2 notes. So you've got an E at the top and a B at the bottom. And you want to listen out for the top E, and you want to, it's almost as if you're just pressing the E, or leaning towards the E, so that the E comes out more than the B. And you can actually just do this on a tabletop, so that the thumb that's resting on the B is literally just resting on the B. If you make no sound at all, the E will stand out, and that's exactly how I would practice it. So you play the 2 notes, or rather you play the top E, and don't worry so much about the B underneath it. So you're basically just leaning on the E itself. When you've got the notes added in the left hand, you do exactly the same thing. So you just concentrate on leaning on the E and just very lightly playing the notes underneath. And even if the notes underneath sound, it doesn't really matter. And eventually, over time, you'll create, or rather you'll develop, a better degree of control. So you just take a 2-note chord or a 3-note chord, and you just feel as if you're just pushing into the top note. If you take a piece like Schumann's Cradle song, you practice exactly the same thing in exactly the same way. So here's the top line of the Cradle song. And your melody is doing this. And the accompanimental part, the notes underneath the chord, really need to be played lightly. So you emphasize the top note by leaning towards it. And you can practice it this way too, whereby you play the top note of each chord, and then you play the 2 accompanimental notes underneath as a block. That is the 2 notes together, and lightly, and then the next melody note, and then the 2 notes underneath it, and then the next melody note, and then the 2 notes underneath it. And you can do that with any music where you've got similar patterns. Now you can also just take an individual chord on its own, and you can just practice exercising individual notes to create different sound effects. So you could play a D chord, for example, and you could just lift the 3rd finger up, holding on to the outer notes, and just playing the F sharp. And then you could play the chord again, and you can just play the top note of the chord with the 5th finger. And this is all about developing control, and then you could do exactly the same thing, holding on to the 2 top notes, or the A and the F sharp rather, and just very lightly pressing on the D. Now you can do those exercises obviously both in the right hand and the left hand. And when the chords become more complicated, when you have more notes in the chord, you can practice in exactly the same way. So I hope that those basic tips will help you when it comes to voicing your chords.